We look at Pop Art right quick while you try to figure out what picture to use. And I don't know if anyone knows anything about what I've been doing for the last 4 years, but since I had raised dogs and had hundreds of dog pictures, and I've taken hundreds more, I started doing Dr. Bear, who is a dog artist who buys dog art from other dogs. And there are dogs that create the paintings, and the dogs sell the paintings, and it's a pseudo dog world. So, and then I make this is my little funny dog blog, because I think I'm funny. Whether I really am or not, I don't know. But so here's what I did, and then I play with the names. So instead of Andy Warhol, this is Andy Wardog. And do you know Johnny English? Are you all familiar with the artist Johnny English? He's an actor from Great Britain who makes these really funny faces with his face. And so I saw this one of Johnny English, and I took my Frenchie, a picture of this Frenchie, and tried to make her face in Photoshop look like the Johnny English, so that's Johnny Frenchie, and then did an Andy Warhol just by changing the background color. That because some of his things, that's all he did, is that he would have a painting from a newspaper print like Marilyn Monroe, and he came in with silkscreen and did different silkscreens of her. And so if you've seen the Campbell's Soup one, that they all are a silkscreen of Campbell's Soup. And what he did with Elizabeth Taylor and Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe, some of the presidents, is that he would just change the color in the background a little, and he did that by making a silkscreen print. So I did that digitally with Johnny Frenchie. And then so you can play with one of your pictures and posterize it and do that as well. What I did with Lichtenstein share, and I'm not completely happy with the Ben Day dots. This is a Ben Day dots, and instead of Lichtenstein, I put Lick like L-I-C-K, so Lichtenstein. And I didn't spell Cher right either, because I thought maybe Cher would be mad because her name, I think, is copyrighted as Cher, so I purposely misspelled Cher. And found this Afghan hound that I thought looked a lot like Cher, and gave it the earrings and tried to look like Cher. So that was my idea. So here is how we created it, and we can do the very same thing pretty easily. That here's a quick look that you start by putting your image in the background, and then you're going to use a pretty wide pencil, which I'll show you there in Photoshop, and you need to trace everything so that all of it is closed, that you don't have lines anywhere that aren't closed somewhere. Like the outside edge can be open, but this whole shape here is closed, and this whole shape here is closed. So I drew that with the wide pencil. I bet when I went to do the features on the Bulldog pups, I got a smaller pencil so that it didn't cover everything up, that even the paws. And then this Ben Day dot here, I looked and looked and looked, and we're going to make patterns that are seamless. And I looked and looked to find seamless Ben Day dots and played with them. And I've made one here for you that you can use. That it's not ideally perfect because the dots aren't perfect, but if you right-click it on your computer, you can save the image as and put it on your computer. And then if you want to clean those, just because I put it on the web, it's become less clean. And save that image as, and then I'll show you how you can play with those Ben Day bots. So I'm going to save that in downloads right now, and that's what I want you to do from this page. And then I've got my image like this, so that you can come in once you've done that with your selection tool, which is the magic wand tool, and select any part as long as those are solidly filled in with no spaces. Then you can select it and pour those in with your paint bucket as a pattern. All right, and then you can reverse these images on your Ben-Day dots and select them with different colors. So that's what I'm going to show you in Photoshop here. So first thing is that the right one? This is Pumpkin as a puppy. And the first thing you could do when you come in with your image is we want to have this to be a good print size, and she isn't because it's at a 72 dot per inch photograph. And I wanted to crop the outside out that I took of her. So I can see it's 16 by 24. So when you open up your photograph and you cropped it in where you want to go to image size and see what that size is. And it's at a 72 dot resolution. And if I make this smaller and make it 300, it's only going to be 3 by 6. And I don't want that to happen. So we're going to do something a little bit different this time. And because I'm not going to use this real photograph, I'm going to draw it. So we're going to start, if your photograph is a small size, one of the ways you can do that when you draw it and get around it is by going to Layer, when you got it cropped in, and go and create it as a smart object and convert it to a smart object. So you do that, and when you're successful and you've done it right, over here on the side, this little box should show. And what that does is it makes a Photoshop type vector graphic. A raster graphic is what we've been doing so far. That a raster is read with series of dots and O's. A vector graphic is a mathematical calculation so that when you make it bigger and smaller, it stays the same. You do that in Illustrator. In Photoshop, you really can't do that completely, but this is their way of making it rasterized. So that's a real important thing to know how to do, is to make that a smart object. Now I can go into image size. It's going to blur some, but it's not going to be so bad that I can't totally deal with it. And this time I'm going to take off the resample, and I'm going to go ahead and make that 300 and turn the resample back on, I guess. The resample should be on. Make that 300, and then I'll make my height and width kind of what I want the outside image print size to be. So I think I could probably get away with 16 inches. That would be 10 by 16. And you can see as I did that it blurred some here, that you can see some blur. Maybe I could get away with that being 16 there. As you see how I get bigger, even though it's a smart object, it's going to blur more and more. So that is part of the problem. But if I hadn't done it, let's step back and undo that. Just so that you'll see what happens if you don't do that. All right, so it's no longer a smart object, and if I could do that right now, I want you to see the difference. Image size, 300, 16 at the top one, 16, and click OK. Not bad. That actually wasn't a bad photograph, but usually it's so bad sometimes if your image is really, really small, you can't even tell what it is, that it will blur it so badly. So if that happens to you and you open up an image and make it bigger to draw from and you can't read your image, then you're definitely going to want to make it a smart object. Okay, so here I've got her there. I've got the background blocked, and I'm putting on a new layer right on top of it, and you see the checks underneath it, so it's a transparent layer. And then the trick is to make it pop art that you're going to use your paintbrush, or you could use a pencil tool if you're happier with the pencil tool. But you want your brush here to be a smooth brush. So if you're down here when you've got something like this going on, you're going to go all the way up to the top and choose one of these, and then you're going to want a fairly big pixel. So That's at 19. I can try it and see what happens. That doesn't look bad. And then I'm just going to trace the entire drawing with a hard edge of my pencil. Anytime that you want to stop and go in and zoom in and get close, if you don't think your drawing is very good, you can get really close. But the big thing is when you're tracing it, I'm going to go at 100% so you can see. While you're tracing it, you want to make sure that there are no open gaps. Now, when you trace it, if it's not very smooth when you're done, then we can do some things to smooth that out. But that is step one, and I want everyone to go that far and step their drawing before we go on to step two. So step one would be getting your image to be a big print size, 300 dots per inch, and then finding a pencil that's pretty big, that you've got a nice heavy black line, something fairly smooth, and then tracing their whole drawing on another layer. And then when you're done, you ought to be able to turn off that background and make the background go away, and you have a drawing of your photograph. Questions so far? I think this is a really pretty basic way to start drawing, and especially for those of you who may not draw all the time, that this will still allow you to draw well, because we all can start developing the tools to trace something.